Hey everyone, James DePaulo here with Andover Audio. After he had purchased one of our Model 1 music systems, which he uses to listen to test vinyl pressings, I recently had the opportunity to speak with Jack Douglas. Now Jack is a multi-platinum music producer, recording engineer, mixer, arranger and composer, and he's worked on iconic albums by John Lennon, the Imagine album, Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic, and much of their catalog, Cheap Trick, Supertramp, and much, much more. Jack has a lot of wisdom about the music making process, but we focused on vinyl. You know, the format versus other formats, listening to mono versus stereo, and where listening is headed. I hope you enjoy our chat, and feel free to leave a comment about what you like. Thanks. I thought I would just ask you right off the bat, what are your thoughts? Having worked so long in the industry, you say you've been between two speakers for over 50 years now. What is it like seeing vinyl being the main medium and then kind of drifting away and then kind of coming back as it has, just recently?
Well, I mean, I had a tremendous vinyl collection at one point. I mean, filled this room with classical music, film scores, jazz, and rock. And it was in the basement of my home. It was so big, I put it in the basement. There was a flood, destroyed all of my vinyl.
Oh man!
I think my son and daughter saved, particularly my son saved a bunch of jazz records because he's a jazzer, and this is when he was a kid. And he still has those, and he's a professional musician. So
that's awesome.
He loved those jazz records.
Yeah.
So then I didn't buy much vinyl after that, and I would listen to 2-track tapes in my home. My Ampex machine. I would take home from the studio 2 tracks, and I had a really good Nakamichi cassette machine, so if I was in rehearsals, I would record my rehearsals on the Nakamichi, which was portable. A beautiful compressor in it, had really nice mic pre's in it. It was excellent. So I would go home and listen to the Nakamichi, and it got to be where I was not listening to much vinyl anymore. And even though I had a great system, I had this giant Bozak system. There were Bozak concert grand monitors, and subs were powered by 400 watts. I mean, it was insane. But I started to drift away from it, and then there was the CDs came, and I was like, well, this is so convenient now.
Right.
And I started also, I started recording digital in 79.
Okay.
And the first digital machines were 3M. This was long before DATs. I mean, it was probably maybe 8-bit, really, but there was no noise, there was no hiss, and that was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Then there was the Sony 24-bit, and that sounded better, and I started using that up to 48 tracks on that.
Wow.
But every once in a while I'd go, you know what? It doesn't sound like tape. And so I got to where I would record certain things on digital, and I never liked that, so I never went there. So I record certain things digital, and other things like rock. If there was hard rock, I would go tape, multi-track tape. 2 tape machines, for example. Double Fantasy is a 16-track and a 24-track. Studer locked together, synced up together.
So you're always keeping tape as a recording medium.
I mean, for some things, I mean, some people just didn't even want to know about digital in the early days. And the early Pro Tools, I wasn't too crazy about it, but I got into it. It was competitive. But anyway, then I got into like just listening to CDs because the convenience of not having to flip the record over, and my turntables were always manual, so it was always make sure you get it right at the beginning of the record. And
yeah.
But I was just not doing vinyl anymore at all. Period. Just it was over, and I was just listening to CDs. I had a tremendous CD collection, and still do. And then I got to look at your ad, and I thought, our home here in Nyack, we have a fairly large system for the TV, and we have a fairly large system for where I play CDs. But there was room for what I saw in the living room for that unit, and it just sounded right to me. And so I inquired about it and bought it from you guys, and you delivered it. I put it together. It was very exciting.
Thanks for that.
and put on. I went out to the garage, and my other son, who is now works for everybody, but in particular, he's been installing Dolby Atmos in studios.
Right.
He was once a DJ when he was a kid, and his two techniques and his mixer and boxes of his albums were outside. And so I went out and I got one that looked like it was in pretty good condition. I put it on the turntable after I set it up properly, and I was like, wow, this sounds pretty good. So I went and got some of my test pressings that are in really good condition. Double Fantasy, Aerosmith, Patti Smith, Cheap Trick. I started playing my test pressings, particularly ones that, because I would have 2 or 3 of each album. The ones that were approved meant that there was no surface noise. I had okayed them, and I just started listening to those. And now it's down to I'm having an album delivered every day.
Yeah, you got the vinyl bug that people often get, right?
Totally got it, and it just sounds so wonderful and warm. And today, what was today? Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd. And
nice.
And I put that on and worked out to it, and I put a mat down in the living room. And I did my floor exercise.
Yeah.
and my wife said to me, "That's the coolest thing you've bought in a long time."
Well, that's a good comment and good feedback, right?
Yeah. So I mean, today we ordered Amy Winehouse's first album. She was telling me all the things that she needs. I'm desperately trying to get the Parlophone, the English version of Rubber Soul in mono. It's very hard to find.
Yeah, tell us about mono. We had spoke last week about your views on mono. Every people listen to stereo, and sometimes they don't realize there is a stereo and a mono. We're talking kind of the general audience. What is it about mono that still interests you?
The thing about mono, and when I bought all of the Beatle albums up to Sgt. Pepper. No, I think even after in mono. Those are the records that I wanted, and I bought them. They were mono. Mm-hmm. And then I had a long discussion with John about starting mixing Double Fantasy. He was like, let's not make it too wide. And I said, that's fine. I said, you really prefer mono. And then we got into a 2-hour discussion about how when they mixed those records, so the White Album, that I got in stereo. But when they mixed those records, they mixed mono at Abbey Road Studios, EMI Studios. And they mixed for depth and not for this big left and right thing. It was all about depth. And when you listen to those records in mono, you understand that things go back and back and back. Just, and the clarity of hearing those mono mixes, they're, just, if you think of music as a theater, then you could think that that a stereo is like a movie screen. It's a bit flat, but there's a left and right. And if you think about mono, think of the Metropolitan Opera House, where there's just tremendous, the stage is so
right, it's
deep.
really far back.
Yeah, and that's what those mono records sounded like. And it was really funny, again, when I started working with John, long before I would ask him questions like this, I started working with him on Imagine. And and while we were doing Imagine, both he and Phil Spector wore buttons that said "Back to Mono."
Back to mono. Maybe we'll start seeing those again, right?
I think I still have one of those buttons because he gave them to everybody that was involved in the sessions. So I now started buying and received a bunch of Dylan records. Highway 61 Revisited, Blonde on Blonde, all the way going back. I've already got those.
Yeah.
And they're mono. The original Columbia mono recordings were still available, brand new, and they sound wonderful.
I wonder with everybody buying so many records again, this whole new generation, that perhaps there'll be more people kind of exploring this mono thing, and maybe just some renewed interest in it. Just like now I'm kind of interested in hearing more mono, where I wasn't before.
But you want to start with records that were mixed in mono. So,
right.
There's not a whole lot of them available. I think there's a Beatle box of vinyl, but it's a box, and I think it's about $2,000 of original mono recordings. I'm not sure if I'm going to go in that direction.
I'll call you tomorrow, and you probably have it.
Just to get Rubber Soul, yeah.
It's interesting. There's been just so many different formats over the years. Tapes, CDs, streaming. In the early 2000s, and now you have really high res being pushed, on a more kind of mass level, and
high res and lossless. So
like the FLAC stuff. It does, I guess kind of back in the day, right, when you were just kind of getting started, it was really, you only had a few things. You had vinyl and maybe tapes, right? Now it seems like there's so many different choices. How does that, I guess what I'm getting at is, how does that kind of change the way music is made, recorded, mixed, mastered,
I think I mentioned this to you once before, and that is on my console in Los Angeles. And I have every bell and whistle in that room, every old piece of gear, Fairchilds and Poltex and anything you can imagine. In the middle of the console is a Bose Wave radio.
Yeah.
Just a little black box that will play, a CD, and in the aux input is the output of the board. And that's the last place I go, because if it sounds right in that little Bose Wave radio, then it's going to sound right in earbuds. It's going to sound right when it's streamed. Because there's something about that radio, Bose Wave radio, that really sounds like what the consumers are listening to.
So maybe you could talk about the test pressings again real quick. And you're still using this process even with Joe Perry's recent record that you're talking about,
Yeah. Just in time, I had the unit up and running for like 2 days, and Joe calls me up and says, I got the test pressings for my new album that Johnny Depp and I produced. And so he said, I'm going to send it to you. You tell me if it's okay. And so I was able to play it. And then he said, what did you play it on? And I sent him a picture of that, and he said, what is that? And I explained it to him, and I told him, hey, it sounds, exactly like what we were mixing. I had a test pressing a double fantasy, of course, and that was also after putting up one of my son's hip hop, something that he was, DJing.
Yeah.
Then I went and I got a double fantasy test pressing that I had, and I put it up, and it sounded like the mix, and that is like the most important to me, is that it represented the mix that I did perfectly. So that you can't really ask for more than that. It's a great way to check test pressings, and
Yeah.
I think that I'll be checking a lot more test pressings because everything now that I've done has gone or is on its way to vinyl. So,
Well, I thought maybe we could just wrap up with, maybe what's the stuff you're working on now, and kind of generally, what do you think is the future for vinyl is going to be? Are we going to have vinyl in 50, 100 years out amongst whatever formats we have, then?
I don't. Have you ever seen the movie Forbidden Planet?
No, I haven't.
They so that takes place in the future, and in that they listen to recordings on a machine where they take this disc and they put it in this under this glass, and it spins, but not down. It spins while it's sitting up, and it creates a picture, and it's like a DVD, and this incredible sound. So I remember seeing that. That was 1956. And I was like, wow. But, at that point in time, I was listening to 78. And I was thinking, wow, is that the future?
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, we've gone way past that. Just way past it. I don't know if there'll be vinyl in the future. I think the next 20 years we'll be listening to vinyl. But I think that our industry is moving so fast that we'll have some kind of implants, and we'll just say play, or we may even just think play this particular piece, and it will appear in our skulls.
Which are good conductors for sound, right?
Yeah, 100 years from now,
At least
there's some strange binormal configuration that will sound like it's, that is more likely than anything, any physical thing or any download. I don't think we'll have to go anywhere for it, than to just call on it.
Well, Jack, it's been a real pleasure, and I can't wait to share this with the rest of the folks that follow us on social media, et cetera, et cetera. So thanks again.
James.
Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see ya.
Yeah, see ya. Appreciate it. Talk to you later.
Everybody.
All right, bye.